Hello, this is Roman Gabriel, and you are listening to The Grilling Truth.
Welcome to the Grilling Truth's NFL Legends Show, brought to you by Gridiron Mo, an interactive football app where you get to call what you think the offense or defense should do during a live NFL game and see what all other fans have called also. Make sure you check out Gridiron Mo at www.gridironmo.com. I'm your host for the Legends Show, Mike Goodpaster, and our guest today was, I think, in my opinion, and I think most people I know, the greatest quarterback in Cincinnati Bengals history, was a 1981 NFL MVP, helped lead the Bengals to Super Bowl XVI. Help me welcome to the Grilling Truth, quarterback Ken Anderson.
Thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on because I can tell you this. I was born in 1968, same year the Bengals were, and when I grew up in the backyard, I was always Kenny Anderson throwing the ball to Isaac Curtis, who was my friend who wasn't near as fast as Isaac.
No, I tell you what, it was a fun period of my life in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is still considered home to me and my family. And you know, I think back, and it's fun to come back and see some of the old guys. Bob Johnson and Bob Trumpy, and John Stoffel was a little bit before me, and of course, Collinsworth and Anthony, those guys. We had a really special relationship with a bunch of guys.
Yeah, and I've had probably 20 guys that played for the Bengals between 75 and 1990, and all those guys just seemed like they absolutely loved being here and playing for the Bengals.
Well, it was a fun time. Especially in the early 70s, nobody made a lot of money. We hung around together. We all grew up together, had families together, and you just, like I say, special relationships.
All right. Now, when did you realize, when you were younger growing up, whether it was college at Augustana or high school or before, when did you realize that you might be good enough to play in the NFL?
Probably not till I was a senior in college. I wasn't real big and coming out of high school, and that's why, I wasn't recruited, by any bigger schools. When you're 6 foot, 175 pounds, that's really not, big enough. And, I thought basketball was my best sport, but that wasn't really big enough either. And, I knew a lot of kids that went to Augustana and went out there and had an absolutely wonderful time. And, with Coach Storenko at the start of my career, Coach Newcomb, some special players I played with. All of a sudden I started to grow, and NFL scouts started to come by, and I thought I might get a chance. I didn't think I'd get drafted in the third round. I was hoping that after the draft somebody would want to sign me as a free agent.
All right, so what were your thoughts on being drafted by the Bengals? I mean, with the legendary coach, owner, Paul Brown.
Well, that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Going there, and it was not only Paul Brown being there, but, also my first quarterback coach was Bill Walsh, and who gave me, the fundamentals that lasted as a lifetime as a player, and then, for 17 years as a coach in the NFL. And had I gone somewhere else and not had that tutelage, I probably would have been teaching school very quickly.
Yeah, it's not too bad to start off with two Hall of Fame coaches.
No, it wasn't. And like I said, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. And, Virgil Carter was there, and I got to be the backup my rookie year and had a chance to learn. And actually started 4 games when Virgil was hurt at the beginning of the season. So I got a little bit of experience and won the job my second year.
All right, so tell us a little bit about Paul Brown, what it was like to be coached by him. I'm sure you developed a relationship with him in later years. Just talk about the man a little bit.
Well, he really never raised his voice, but he would be up there and we would meet, after a game, and he'd be up there and he had his khaki pants on and his plain white T-shirt and his black cap and his glasses and his yellow legal pad, and his comments, if I didn't play well, Anderson, this game may be a little bit too big for you now. He got everybody's attention. I wish I would have been around him in the Cleveland days when he was a little bit younger, and he's such an innovative guy. But he was in his late 60s when I was there, and let the coaches coach. And he really wasn't directly involved in the game planning per se, but had a real good feel for the game and a real good judge of talent, and it was just a remarkable man.
Yeah, and I think people forget how good those Bengals teams were, especially from 73 through 77. But 73, you take the Bengals to the playoffs, 10-4. You met up with the Miami Dolphins. You want to talk a little bit about the guys that were on that team? I mean, the guys like Lamar Parrish, Ken Riley, Isaac Curtis. I mean, there was a lot of great players on that team.
Oh, Tommy Casanova, from a defensive standpoint, and, Trumpy and I always say, Trumpy, they talk about these tight ends nowadays that, these big guys that can split outside and run pass routes. That was Bob Trumpy back in the early 70s. He was, 6'5", 240, ran like a deer. I would say he was Gronkowski before Gronkowski.
Yeah, I mean, him and probably John Mackey were the first two big tight ends that could stretch the field.
Yeah, and Isaac Curtis was really special. And how about when we had Charlie Joyner, a Hall of Famer on the other side for Isaac for a few years. So, and then, Rufus Mays and Vernon Holland were our tackles, and, Bob Johnson was, our center for the first decade, that we had the team, and Pat Matson and Howard Fest and John Shinners at the guards. We had a pretty good offensive line, and I remember it was several years ago, one of my brother-in-laws gave me a little DVD of the 73, 74, 75 highlights of the Bengals, and I had forgotten how good we were in that era.
Yeah, I mean, the problem was you came along in an era where you had a great team, but then you had the Miami Dolphins, Pittsburgh Steelers, Oakland Raiders. 73, you got knocked out by the Dolphins, 75 by the Raiders. How frustrating is it that people don't really remember that team? Because I think the 75 team was as talented as any of the two Super Bowl teams the Bengals had.
Oh, no question. But how about, I think it was 75. We only played 14 games. We were 11-3, and we were the lone wild card. You only had one wild card in those days because Pittsburgh was 12-2.
Yeah, you lost to Pittsburgh twice, I think, and Cleveland once.
Yeah, and and in those days, I think Pittsburgh was 12-2. I think we were 11-3, and both Houston and Cleveland were 10-4 and didn't make the playoffs, and they would have probably won any of the other divisions.
Yeah, because I think it was Bum Phillips' first year at Houston, 75.
Yeah, so I mean, we kind of beat up on the rest of the league, but beat up on each other as well.
All right, now take us through the playoff game a little bit. The thing I remember about it, that's really the first Bengal season I remember. You played the Raiders in Oakland. We're down 31-14, got it back to 31-28, and just missed out on winning the game. You want to tell the listeners a little bit about that playoff game, what you remember?
Well, it was, a great comeback, and the thing was that their outside linebacker was another Hall of Famer, Ted Hendricks. And, in those days, the way the pass protection schemes were, that, you put a running back on linebackers, and he was a handful for us, that day. And I remember, going down, and I believe it was the fourth down, we're going for it, and I could see Chip Myers coming open for the first down, and before I could get it off, was sacked by Ted Hendricks to end the game. And that actually, changed pass protection schemes the next year, where you started either sliding the line toward a guy like that or popping a guard out, so you didn't have to put a running back on a pass rusher like that.
Yeah, and then what was your relationship like with Coach Walsh? You said he was he was basically the offensive coordinator, or did Paul Brown still handle that?
No, Bill was the offensive coordinator, and he it was interesting because in those days we had the head coach, and we had 3 offensive coaches and 3 defensive coaches, and so Bill actually coached quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers. Bill Johnson coached the offensive line, and Jack Donaldson coached the running backs. So we would be in training camp, and of course, you've always got little, we call it individual periods where you work on your skills. And well, Bill was coaching 3 positions, and so the quarterbacks, to get our individual work, we would have lunch, and then before the afternoon practice, we went out for an hour with him and just worked individually. But he was just, all the accolades that he's had over the years, he certainly deserves, but was really a genius as far as his offensive schemes were concerned. And the West Coast, developed a little bit, out of necessity when you're an expansion team and you can't really run the football effectively, and the quick throws and the running backs on flares, that kind of thing, spreading the field both vertically and horizontally, kind of led to that offense.
All right, now 1975, Paul Brown's last year, turns the reins over to Bill Tiger Johnson. What was the team's general feeling, and what was your feeling that Walsh didn't get the head coaching job?
Well, I remember back in those days that I really thought that was the correct decision. I mean, I thought Tiger was more ready to be a head coach at that moment in time than Bill was. And Tiger was a great offensive line coach. He was a great player in his own right, a center for the San Francisco 49ers. So I thought the decision was correct, and I understood Bill's frustration, and it would have been great if he could have stayed, but he felt snubbed and ended up going to San Diego that next year.
Yeah, and Tiger's first 2 years, the Bengals were really good again. 76, I think, was 10-4. The game that stands out. What was that?
No, I was going to say, and it just missed out on the playoffs that year at 10-4.
Yeah, I mean, it had a couple opportunities there. The one that stands out to me is playing Pittsburgh here. The game's nice the first half. You get like a half a foot of snow in the second half. Ended up losing 7-3. You want to talk about that game a little bit?
Well, we were up 3-0 going in at halftime, and then all of a sudden you come out and there's 4 inches of snow, and we're going to win the game 3-0. I mean, you couldn't do anything. And all of a sudden, we're kind of backed up, and our running back fumbles, and Franco Harris takes it. And now they're up 7-3. And so, I remember one time they punted near the end of the game, and the ball stuck in the snow, on our own 1 yard line. And I hit Isaac for a bomb out the midfield, and a couple other passes. And so we've got 4th down, and we've got a pass call to the left. And I tell Chip Myers, get open in the right corner of the end zone. And so we snapped off. Joe Green had actually taken off his shoes and socks to play the last game in his bare feet to think he could get more traction in the snow. And I let the ball go to Chip. I think it's a touchdown, and the defensive back got 1 finger on it to knock it away.
Yeah, because that's a Bengal team I think could have done some damage too. And then the next year, 77, I think it was 8-6, but just missed the playoffs again. Actually beat Pittsburgh in some bad weather towards the end of the the end of the season. I think Trumpy had the big play there, didn't he?
Well, it could have been. You were kind of getting in that era where we were going down a little bit, and I think it was 78 was the year that I broke my hand in the last preseason game.
Yeah, that was against Green Bay, wasn't it?
No, yes, Green Bay in Milwaukee, and so we started off 0-4. And I remember, we had to win, and so I had the doctors take the cast off my hand on a Monday, and I played that Sunday when I really wasn't ready. My hand wasn't strong enough. We got beat out in San Francisco, and they let Bill Johnson go, and Homer Rice finished out that year, and then the next year, and 79 was just an awful year for us, and we weren't a good football team, and and obviously, when things happen, the coaching change is made, and that's when Forrest Gregg came in 1980, and then things started to turn back around.
Yeah, so let's talk about 1980. That season, the Bengals were 6-10, but if I remember right, Bengals beat the Steelers twice during the year, lost a lot of close games. What did Forrest Gregg do to come in and change the attitude and the culture of the team?
Well, I think number one, he instilled discipline. He was a no-nonsense guy. We had a very physical training camp. Our practices during the week were very physical. I mean, you could see us getting better, as the season went on. And back in those days, it wasn't necessarily the team doctor, the trainers that said when you were healthy, it was the head coach. And I remember one time in 1980, we had a home game, and so we were practicing down at Riverfront Stadium on Friday, and Friday was short yardage and goal line day, and it was literally a scrimmage, or Forrest wasn't happy, and it's in full pads and a lot of hitting, and you can't have that kind of practice without tight ends, and both our tight ends, Danny Ross and M.L. Harris, were hurt, and we're down there, and they're in sweats, and Forrest was not happy. He went up and he touched them both and said, "You're now healed," and we waited for them to go back and get their pads and their helmets. Came back, we had our practice, and won that game. So we knew we were getting better in 1980, and we're excited for 1981.
All right, so the 81 season starts. Didn't start out the best for you personally. Team's down, I think, 21-0 against Seattle, the season opener. Turk Schonert, who was the third-string quarterback, comes in, leads them to the win. I think the next game was in New York against the Jets. Was there any worry there that they were going to replace you then?
Well, actually, I had after the Seattle game had gone back and heard that the force that came out on the news and said I was not going to start.